Thank you, Chair. Obviously, it's an honour for the External Action Service to be invited as an expert to this meeting on foreign policy to say briefly what the European Union has tried to do over the last 9 months to respond to the popular revolution, the Arab Spring. First of all, can I stress something that normally goes unnoticed, namely that the European Union was the body which most swiftly and hugely responded to the emergencies arising through revolutions in Arab countries, in Tunisia, Libya and Egypt. The European Union, as usual, was the main supplier of humanitarian aid. That's worth stressing, because in those countries, particularly following events in Libya, people did need humanitarian aid. The European Union was also quickest to respond through civil protection mechanisms to the evacuation of people who wanted evacuation. First of all, obviously, citizens from EU countries, but also nationals of third countries who were stuck in Tunisia or Libya and who wanted to be evacuated quickly. And the European Union, through the MIC civil protection mechanism under the Commission, intervened very quickly. And the European Union was also the first body to commence sanctions against autocrats in the 3 countries concerned. Tunisia against Ben Ali and henchmen, quickly against Mubarak and entourage, and then Libya with Colonel Gaddafi and his family, very quickly being subject to EU sanctions. And I'm stressing this because people often say nothing about this. They believe the European Union should have done more. Obviously, we should have done more. That's always the case. But one must stress that given the urgency, the European Union quickly and massively got organised. And then there was a more structured response through aid on 2 fronts. First of all, the European Union immediately started with a huge aid package for civil society in Tunisia, Egypt and to a lesser extent in Libya. Since February we've been sending European experts out to help Professor Ben Ashur, who was heading the Commission for Achieving the Aims of the Revolution, in preparing for the elections a few weeks ago in Tunisia. The Europeans were the first to make a contribution towards the changing of the electoral law and preparing the bodies that were required to carry out the elections in Tunisia. We also put forward European experts for Egypt, but that was a bit harder because the Egyptian leadership was less receptive to the offer of EU aid, and that's worth stressing too, because it is a problem we'll constantly come up against in EU response to the Arab Spring. We can intervene only if the leaders in the partner countries want us to do so, and with Egypt, for different reasons, nationalism and so on, the Egyptian leadership didn't really want to see Europeans or anyone else. They're holding off the US and the IMF as well, didn't want them intervening too openly in election preparation. In Libya, in Benghazi, before the conflict ended, we supplied technical experts to help civilians during the revolution in creating capacity building for civil society bodies in Benghazi. So that's the first aspect for us to intervene. And the second, apart from strengthening civil society in preparing for elections was deployment of an election observation mission in Tunisia, more than 180 observers, with MEPs led by Mingarelli, carrying out the election observation mission, and this gave the new powers in Tunisia a legitimacy they wouldn't have had without considerable input from the European Parliament and others. In Egypt we did the same thing, and there too we came up against a bloc. The Egyptian leadership didn't want to meet an election observation mission. For the elections in future in Libya, we'll be making a proposal, and we do hope that the Libyan leadership will be prepared to receive an election observation mission.
Jusqu'à présent, au plan politique, trois choses.
So far politically we've done three things. Huge support to the civil society, particularly groups such as women's groups and youth groups who were important in the revolution. Then strengthening the institutions preparing for the elections, and then election observation missions to the countries prepared to accept them. And then we have more structural aid, mainly as follows.
Nous avons proposé aux pays partenaires de travailler sur la gestion des flux migratoires. Nous savons que c'est l'un des points essentiels pour les pays partenaires qui ressentent le régime de visa Schengen comme quelque chose qui bloque la coopération et le développement des relations. Alors nous leur avons proposé d'engager un dialogue. Okay.
So we did election Yeah, everything's okay. English on 2. English is on 2. So the first area where we want structured assistance is through dialogue on matters of mobility, migration and security, aimed for each of the partner countries at having a mobility partnership, where we'll try and go into the following points. Firstly, allowing citizens of partner countries wanting to come for short-term visits to our countries to get visas under easier and less costly conditions, the visa facilitation agreement there. We'd like to negotiate that with a certain number of partner countries, and partner countries will then agree to an illegal immigrant readmission agreement, an agreement on border management and greater security for travel documents for partner countries. So visa facilitation, and for that, a security dialogue with third countries. The second element of the mobility pillar is to go into matters relating to labour migration, and that's complex, of course, because we do know that this is politically so sensitive in member states, but we do believe that we ought to be able to start a debate with our member states and partners to control labour migration. You know that we do need labour from those countries in certain labour areas, and we have to be able to go into that calmly if we can, respecting the interests of both, to be able to manage any labour flows onto our labour market from the Maghreb and Mashrek countries. And finally, we'd like to work with them on the best way of using immigrants who've spent some months or years here and want to go back, like to work with the countries of origin on the best way they can use that labour which has obtained qualifications in our countries. So that's the mobility partnership. Then commerce and trade, we intend to negotiate full, deep, free trade agreements with those countries. So to take away any remaining customs duties and go further by removing all non-tariff barriers to trade, helping them to come up to our standards and rules, the community acquis, so that their societies, if exporting or investing in the single market, no longer face a load of non-tariff barriers to trade. And the ultimate aim is gradually to integrate the economies of those countries into the Europe's single market, which is very ambitious, but gradually, with the partners who wish so, we can move towards that. Then we'd like to promote cooperation in certain areas such as energy, transport, and the environment, so that gradually we can integrate sectors of those countries' economies into the EU single market, for instance, electricity and gas, through expansion and interconnection of pipeline networks and rules convergence. In the medium term, we could integrate the gas and electricity systems from those countries into our own. And for transport, we would be extending the trans-European networks in those countries, and after a while the high-speed trains and motorways would reach those countries and allow easier transport. Then, last area before I stop and take questions is money, the cooperation budget. We've considerably increased the cooperation budget for Maghreb and Mashrek countries, and increased the amount of EIB loans by €1 billion, and we've also extended the mandate of the EBRD to those countries. The BRD was set up to help the former Eastern European countries, Soviet Union and Turkey, and we're extending it to countries in transition in the Middle East and Northern Africa. So a whole range of measures which form what Europe is offering. We've said this has to be based on more for more, i.e. those countries that want to advance more with democratic reform, so a form of soft conditionality that will reimburse them for making fastest economic and political headway. So just in a nutshell, that's the EU response at the moment to the Arab Spring.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Mingarelli.
Thank you, Mr. Mingarelli. Though I tried to follow the replies very quickly, this is much fuller than I thought you were likely to be. So thank you for summarizing so well. And